Hello, welcome back as we continue reading Philip Yancey's The Bible Jesus Read. In the description of the video, there is a link if you would like to purchase this book. And let's continue reading the final chapter, chapter 7, Advance Echoes of a Final Answer. One question, however, no longer plagues me as it once did. The question, does God care? It lurks behind Chet Ramo's poignant story about the silent universe. It also lurks behind much of the Old Testament. Job reluctantly concluded that no, God could not care about him or about other suffering people. How faint the whisper we hear of him, sighed Job. The psalmist cried out for some sign that God heard their prayers, some evidence that he had not forsaken them. I know of only one way to answer the question, does God care? And for me, it proved decisive. Jesus is the answer. Jesus never attempted a philosophical answer to the problem of pain. Yet he did give an existential answer. Although I cannot learn from him why a particular bad thing occurs, I can learn how God feels about it. Jesus gives God a face, and that face is streaked with tears. Whenever I read straight through the Bible, a huge difference between the Old and New Testament comes to life. In the Old Testament, I can find many expressions of doubt and disappointment. Whole books, Jeremiah, Habakkuk, Job, center on the theme. As I have said, almost half of the Psalms have a dark, brooding tone about them. In striking contrast, the New Testament epistles contain little of this type of anguish. The problem of pain has surely not gone away. James 1, Romans 5 and 8, the entire book of 1 Peter, and much of Revelation deal with the subject in detail. Nevertheless, nowhere do we find the piercing question, does God care? I see nothing resembling the accusation in Psalm 77, has God forgotten to be merciful? The reason for the change, I believe, is that Jesus answered the question for the witnesses who wrote the epistles. In Jesus, God presents a face. Anyone who wonders how God feels about the suffering on this groaning planet need only look at that face. James, Peter, and John had followed Jesus long enough for his facial expressions to be permanently etched in their minds. By watching Jesus respond to a hemorrhaging woman, a grieving centurion, a widow's dead son, an epileptic boy, an old blind man, they learned how God felt about suffering. By no means did Jesus solve the problem of pain. He healed only a few in one small corner of the globe. But he did provide an answer to the question, does God care? 3 times that we know of, suffering drove Jesus to tears. He wept when his friend Lazarus died, which gives me a strong clue into how God must feel about my family members and friends who die. Another time, Jesus sorrowed when he looked out over Jerusalem and realized the fate awaiting the fabled city Jerusalem. Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those who sent you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you were not willing, he sighed at one point, Matthew 23:37. Using an image he must have drawn from rural Galilee after fire races through a barn, a farmer may find the corpse of scorched hens, wings outstretched, laying on the barn floor. The farmer kicks aside the corpse and out scramble tiny chicks. The mother had protected them from the fire, sacrificing her own life in the process. That is what Jesus yearned for, to take the punishment vicariously for his people. Finally, Hebrews tells us in 5:7, Jesus offered up loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. But of course, he was not saved from death. In Gethsemane and at Calvary, we get the incredible scene that Martin Luther has described as God struggling with God. Is it too much to suggest that Jesus himself asked the question that haunts me, that haunts most of us one time or another? Do I matter? Does God care? What else can be the meaning of the quotation from Psalm 22? My God, why have you forsaken me? When Jesus Christ faced pain, he responded much as anyone else does. He did not pray in the garden, "O Lord, I am so grateful that you have chosen me to suffer on your behalf. I rejoice in this privilege." No, he experienced sorrow, fear, abandonment, and something approaching desperation. If it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. Even ever attentive to bodily detail, Luke adds, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. We may not get the answer to the problem of pain that we want from Jesus. We get instead the mysterious confirmation that God suffers with us. We are not alone. Jesus' bodily reconstructs trust in God. Because of Jesus, I can trust that God truly understands my condition. I can trust that I matter to God and that God cares regardless of how things look at the time. When I begin to doubt, I turn again to the face of Jesus, and there I see the compassionate love of a God well acquainted with grief. The next section is called, Why Doesn't God Act? At certain moments in the Israelites' history, the question, why doesn't God act, would never have occurred to them. Consider the crowd Moses addressed in the book of Deuteronomy. For example, raised in the Sinai wilderness with a miraculous provision of food and water fresh in their memory, and visible evidence of God's presence hovering in a cloud before them, they probably did not ponder such a question. If they did, Moses and the few remaining senior citizens would quickly remind them of the 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, and the defeat of the mighty Egyptian army. Yet, scroll back a few chapters and you find an entire race of doubters, including Moses himself. For 4 centuries, to get the perspective, think of all that has transpired in world history since Queen Elizabeth's day, before the Pilgrims first set sail for America. They had cried out to God about the terrible conditions in Egypt. God's chosen people were a byword among the nations, mere slaves to be exploited at Pharaoh's whim. How many times had the pharaohs cried out, "Why don't you act, God?" before Moses finally arrived on the scene to challenge their doubt? The prophet Elijah faced a similar crowd of doubters and silenced all their questions with a pyrotechnic display on Mount Carmel. Yet later, he too cowered in a cave, wondering why God didn't simply dispose of King Ahab and his brutal wife Jezebel. Other prophets, among them the esteemed Isaiah and Jeremiah, must have looked back with envy on Elijah, who had at least a few moments of undisputed glory. The Bible records no miracles by these prophets of the word, and many ended up martyred for their efforts. Malachi is the last Old Testament voice, and his book serves as a good prelude to the next 400 years of biblical silence. From the Israelites' point of view, those 4 centuries could be termed the era of low expectations. They had returned to the land after the Babylonian captivity, but the land remained a backwater province under the domination of Persia or Greece or Rome. Imperial armies took turns tramping through Israel. The newly reconstructed temple was a sad imitation of Solomon's architectural wonder. The grand future of triumph and world peace described by the prophets seemed a distant pipe dream. A general malaise set in among the Jews, a low-grade disappointment with God that showed in their complaints and also in their actions. As the people expressed it then, it's futile to serve God. What do we gain by carrying out his requirements? The final question troubled the Jews for centuries after Malachi, and the remaining prophets had faded from the scene. They saw no miracles, no spectacular interventions, and heard no new words from the Lord. Had God forgotten how to be merciful? Had he plugged his ears against the groans? The Old Testament ends on a note of disappointment, unfulfilled longing, and faint hope. I'm going to stop there for today, and next week we're going to finish this book. Hopefully you've been enjoying it, and we'll see you next time.